Everybody to this Cabinet meeting, Kirklees Council Cabinet meeting on the 7th of October 2024.
8th of October.
Oh, sorry, 8th of October, beg your pardon. Time flies. Right, membership of the Cabinet, I think we are all here and there's no substitutes or anything like that, so welcome. And since we have got a lot of public here today, when any of you are speaking, if you could just perhaps name yourselves and your portfolio at the beginning of that. Admission of the public, obviously, we're being held at this meeting is being held on public and online, so welcome to you all. Are there any declarations of interest from the Cabinet? No? Okay, thank you. Are there any deputations and petitions?
No, Chair.
No, thank you very much. Questions by members of the public?
There's no written questions.
Thank you. And questions by elected members, which are oral questions. I believe we have some. I've got my first person on is Joe, Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Chair. Can you tell me if the teams collecting fly tip still have the same complement of staff that they had this time last year, or have they been affected by the vacancy freeze?
Councillor Ahmed.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. No, the arrangements are exactly the same, so there is no other additions or any reductions in terms of the tipping team. So the fly tipping team is exactly the same as it has been.
Supplementary?
I do. Can you tell me how much it costs Kirklees to collect fly tip from across the borough, and what work is being done to be more proactive and actually stopping fly tipping?
Can I come back to you with those figures? I haven't got those at hand. If I had that information, then I would have provided it. Thank you.
Sorry, that I wasn't speaking to the microphone. The next councillor is Councillor Paul Moore, who is on Teams. Paul, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Chair. My first question is about council award budgets, which are devolved funds which councillors collectively allocate within their ward. Historically, this allows councillors to give out relatively small grants and financial support to lots of different grassroots organisations. By cutting this budget by 50%, it will have a huge impact on many groups that only require a relatively small amount of financial support, without which they would struggle to operate and survive. Most of these groups are normally run by a host of volunteers, and I'll plug some of the gaps with the closure of council services, which support the mental and physical health and wellbeing of residents. Please will the council revisit this decision and give a commitment not to further cut the ward budget in the future?
Thank you, Paul. I mean, this item is on the agenda later on. We actually haven't come to a decision yet, but Councillor Turner is willing to respond.
Just for clarity, the decision to cut the ward budget was taken at last year's budget session, so it's not a surprise. So that was March 24. As to future budget allocations, we're currently in process of developing the next year's budget, so that discussions around the ward budgets will be part of those conversations.
Is there a supplementary, Paul?
No supplementary.
Thank you. The next questioner is Councillor Safdar. Imran Safdar, over to you.
So obviously there are some welcome points in the revised parking proposals, but I am incredibly concerned about the disability permit because, as you know, the cost of living crisis is really biting carers and those with special needs and disabilities. So, of course, we welcome that there's going to be a slight reduction in the initial proposed cost of the permits, but is there any way that we could revisit the permits for disabled people, could that be reduced to 0? Because that's an extra cost that disabled families don't need right now because they struggle to work. They can't go out and get another job, can't top the income. You know, able people can maybe get a second job, get a third job, start working online, but disabled families are struggling right now. So is there any possibility we can look at the permits coming to 0?
You're talking about parking permits, not blue badge permits.
For carers, ideally. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Server. I'll raise that at the issue because there's a full report in terms of a lot more details than just the disabilities as well. So if I may, I'll respond to that when we go through the parking permit report.
Have you a supplementary?
Thank you. I hope to hear from you soon. Thank you.
Sorry, my last questioner that I have is Councillor Scott.
Sorry, Chair. I've got a question on behalf of Councillor Darwin that can't be here, but I also have some questions myself, I think 3. So do you want me to read out the one from Councillor Darwin first?
Yes, okay, thank you.
Okay, so please can the Leader of the Council answer the following question. In total, the UK has committed 12.8 billion for the Ukraine, 7.8 billion in military support and 5 billion in non-military support. Perhaps Kirklees needs to change its name to Ukraine to get funding for our much-needed services. If the Ukraine is getting better British taxpayers' money, why then isn't the Leader of the Council applying more pressure on Keir Starmer and demand more funding for the needs of all the people of Kirklees? I'm saying this with a passion because I also support the saving of the specialist provision for dementia care homes.
Thank you, Councillor Darwin, stroke Scott. I can't comment on the amount of money that the UK nationally is giving to Ukraine in any shape or form, but what I can say is that certainly we are using every method possible to press the current government to increase the amount of money that certainly Kirklees gets, but certainly local government as a whole as well. We're well aware that we are down the bottom of the pile when it comes to funding in local government terms, and we will certainly be pressing every way, Keir Starmer and others, to be able to get more funding. Thank you.
Okay.
So now your
my question. Okay, so my first question, I believe, will be to Councillor Ahmed regarding the blue badges. There appears to be a severe backlog and it's still ongoing. Can you offer some reassurance to getting this resolved because it's causing anguish and distress for local people?
Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Councillor Scott. I'll definitely look into this and see whether we can actually expedite the process. Thank you.
Councillor Scott, before you have got another 2, but can I? Councillor Bramwell also wants to have a question, so I'll bring you back in after Councillor Bramwell. Tanisha.
A couple of days ago, I had a meeting with several officers, and one of the biggest issues, in fact, in Dewsbury West in particular, domestic violence is the highest in my ward as opposed to other wards in Kirklees. So what I would like to know is, what is the offer for domestic abused victims right now in Kirklees, and is Kirklees Council working on things as preventative measures, for example, educating young people on healthy relationships and things to this nature?
Thank you, Councillor Bramwell. I will personally say that it's certainly an issue that I feel very, very passionate about, and that we certainly do everything that we can. But I'll hand over to Councillor Addy for more detail.
Councillor Bramwell, yes, I mean, clearly that's very bad news that it's the highest in Kirklees where you are. We do have several measures and facilities to support people in this situation within Kirklees, and funding, I can't remember the pot's name, but we've definitely funded several activities where we have people going out into the community and helping women and girls. I personally would like to see more work with the perpetrators as well. I'd really like to talk to you some more about this, so can I get in touch with you and we can have a look at it, because I'm trying to enhance the general health of everybody, particularly starting with our most deprived areas, and some of the areas in Dewsbury West are those. So public health includes things such as not having to live in fear in your home, and it's really close to my heart, so I really would relish to sit down and chat with you, if that's all right.
Thank you, Councillor Addy. Is there supplementary?
Thank you very much, Councillor Addy. Myself and Councillor Anwar, we are already engaging with officers at the moment to create a Dewsbury West Forum, and within the Dewsbury West Forum we are hoping to set up something that is allocated specifically to domestic abuse victims. But again, as I say, our priority is those preventative measures on building and educating young people on what a healthy relationship looks like, because there's a lot of people that are in abusive relationships and they don't necessarily identify that because they don't know what is healthy and unhealthy. So we have a lot of plans moving forward, including creating some sort of a safe haven and a hub within our ward. So can I ask, will you work with us to create that concept and deliver it effectively within the Dewsbury West ward?
I'd be delighted to work with you on that. That sounds fantastic work, well done. And I'm sure the officers will have passed on all the relevant contacts, but if there's anything else or any others that I can share with you, I'd be delighted to. I'd be delighted to come along and support you when you're doing that, and give it all the backing possible. It's definitely great action to be taken.
Councillor Scott, your second question?
Thank you, and this one's to the leader. What is your commitment to Dewsbury for a burial site within Dewsbury?
Thank you for the question. The commitment is to provide as much burial ground as we are able, but knowing that that is very limited, I'm afraid. But there is a strategic plan for burials across the whole of Kirklees, and we work with all the communities to make sure that we can provide for their needs as much as possible. Thank you. Supplementary?
Yes, thank you. My question was regarding Dewsbury. If you remember before, we issued 500,000 commitment towards sourcing a burial site for Dewsbury, of which 10,000 was allocated at looking at sites. It seems to have stagnated now, and the worrying thing is there may not be any committed burial space for Dewsbury. So can I have commitment today that you will be looking at sites in Dewsbury, not elsewhere?
Certainly we want to look for land in Dewsbury, and if that is available, then that money is there to provide for it. But as at the moment, there is no identified money site that we can spend that money on. But if anyone can come towards us with a particular site, then certainly we will look at it. And your third question, Councillor Scott.
Yeah, my third question, possibly, I'm not too sure if it's to Councillor Crook, if he's still overseeing housing. So mine is there any forward plan of bringing it to full council to let us know an update on the integration from K&H into the council when housing was brought in? Because we do need a presentation and update, particularly to say about the pressures as well within housing that we're having in social housing. So it would be nice that if you could commit today to bringing a presentation or some kind of update to this council.
Thanks very much, Councillor Scott. I'm not sure we'll bring a report on the integration of housing back from the Almo into council, but there is an item on the agenda later on which will reflect our response to the regulatory finding against housing, and does give a decent update on the progress we're making to improve internal, service provision processes and realisation of that agenda in terms of improvement for tenants. So I'm very happy to talk about housing at great length if you'd like to do that. And I know you've previously been housing portfolio holder as well. So certainly an area that is very important for us as a council, and I think you identified as well the pressures that housing is seeing nationally, and we're not immune to that pressure. So certainly we are seeing those pressures in terms of availability, in terms of homelessness. Yeah, I would certainly take advantage of any opportunity to talk to anyone about housing. Thank you.
Supplementary, Councillor Scott.
No, I welcome that, but equally I do think whilst we talk about the improvement, that is not to criticise anything that we are doing. It is an improvement, but I think it's something that should be shared wider within the communities of what we actually are doing.
Thank you. And another question from Councillor Bramwell.
Just off the back of the questions that's just been asked by Councillor Scott, I also do want to raise Dewsbury Cemetery. It's been a long-standing issue for many of my residents, and a lot of work's gone into it. So on the 27th of June 2023, there was an image that was circulated by Kirklees Council at the time with the then leader, Councillor Shabir Pandor, and it claimed that £500,000 had been set aside for investment for a Dewsbury burial provision. Can I ask that still stands with that amount?
I think I've just answered that question, Councillor Bramwell. Yes. If there's no further questions from members, Councillor Khan.
Councillor Patterson, mine is in relation to item 11, parking permits. Do you want me to wait that till then, or? Yeah.
Yes, if there are any questions on any item that's actually on the agenda, then it would be better to raise them then. And I saw a little hand going up at the back there. Is that?
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, yeah. It was a question reference to many of the items that we're covering this afternoon, which is on finance. And we're obviously going through many cost-saving exercises as far as the council's concerned, reference to the TIP, the nursing home and parking charges being increased or implemented. But I was looking at part of the budget appendix for this year and came across one section that's headed delay in repayment or default on loans made by council. What it appears in this appendix is that we have loaned, there's 4 in particular loans that we have outstanding, totalling £33.5 million. And I just wondered, because of what's written in this appendix, where it says potentially resulting in the need to write off the loans, remembering that this number is £33.5 million. I just wondered as a council, particularly the finance side of the council, is what are we doing on a day-to-day basis to make sure that we're reclaiming these loans so we don't have to go through as residents and ward councillors the pains that we're going through, reference to the nursing home closures, the tip closure and also increased parking charges. Thank you.
Councillor Turner, are you willing to answer that question?
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I haven't got the budget book with me, but I will have a look at it. But I don't know which loan you're referring to, 33.5. It is not unusual for local authorities to lend money to each other on a regular basis, and when we do that, it's prudent to put into a budget book that this money may not be paid back. That's in effect, I think that's a standard sentence. We have always recouped all money we have lent to the local authorities, and of course sometimes we borrow off them, and it's a quid pro quo with local authorities. So I think it's just a standard line, just to cover it off, just in case.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Is there a supplementary, Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Chair, yes. The 4 loans, which are 103 New Street, KSDL, Kirklees College and Kingsgate, in the line of order, 12.2 million, 3.8 million, Kirklees College owes 13.6 million and Kingsgate owes us 3.9 million. This was the date registered at the 31st of the 12th, 2023, when that money was last registered as owed. So it would be interesting to know, as far as the council's concerned, what on a regular basis we're doing as the council to collect that money so that the residents don't have to pay for the shortfall.
We constantly monitor repayments, and as far as I'm aware, the last time I checked, all those, apart from KSDL, were meeting their regular interest payments. KSDL is slightly different, but they were meeting their interest payments.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. If there's no more questions now from members of the council, I will move on to the items on the agenda, and we start with the future of dementia care homes provision. Can I ask Councillor Addy to present this report?
I know this is a difficult time for those who have family members at Castle Grange and Claremont House dementia care homes. The day you hand over the care of such vulnerable loved ones to someone else is a time when you take a leap of faith. You have to trust that others will show them the care you do, and I know this feeling well, from my own experience of having to move my mother into care. I also know from that experience that this present time of uncertainty will be creating much anxiety for those who have loved ones in our care homes. Although in the current financial climate we find ourselves in a position where this difficult decision has had to be taken, please be assured that we are still listening. We still want the best possible homes for your loved ones, and we will be moving forward with the utmost care to find the right alternative for the future. We will consult with relatives and staff in both homes on their needs and the future. Armed with that, and when a potential quality provider is found, we will work closely with that provider and with Kirklees Care Association to find the very best way forward possible in our negotiations. Today, I bring this report to Cabinet to ask you to agree for us to take negotiations forward to the point of being able to enter into a contract with an alternative provider. When we reach that stage, we will come back to Cabinet for final agreement. Under this process, there will be consultation with individual families and staff. We will listen to your fears and needs. You can rest assured that the care of Claremont House and Castle Grange residents will be at the heart of this process, and we will only be entering into negotiations with a high-quality provider. And on that basis, I ask Cabinet to agree this report.
Thank you, Councillor Addy. I have several councillors who wish to comment on this. The first councillor being Councillor Joe Lawson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure in the report it wasn't meant to imply that care assistants are only worth minimum wage and their employer pension contributions a burden. In my experience of working with care assistants over many, many years, they're worth their weight in gold. I worry about maintaining of standards of care for the vulnerable residents that call Castle Grange and Claremont home when this business is transferred into the private sector and needs to make a profit. Those with more complex needs are going to need more care, but will the new business model allow for this? Will staffing levels be maintained at current levels? Will the staff two-peed over actually stay on unfavourable conditions? Dementia sufferers need routine, familiar faces, not high staff turnover. When we look at how care homes are inspected, I'm sure Councillor Addy will agree with me that a recent health and adult social care scrutiny panel, the CQC, left us with more questions than answers regarding inspections. It's also noteworthy that when I went through all the care homes within Kirklees, there was a lot that hadn't even been inspected for years. Do we know if the preferred bidder has actually got a background in providing dementia care? And are you aware of the ratings of their establishments? I also worry that when investigating a complaint, A private provider may just give notice to quit, causing distress and upheaval to residents and their families. And the one thing in my experience is a dementia sufferer needs is a familiar environment, routine and caregivers that they actually know. I would urge Cabinet to reflect on the decision that they are going to make today. This is about people's lives. It's not just about saving money. Thank you.
Councillor Addy, we have got several members who wish to speak. Do you want to come back at the end or to take question by question?
I might come back at the end because I imagine there might be some overlap.
I agree. So the next person is Cathy Scott. Councillor Scott.
Thank you. I could go on about a statement with this, and it is an emotive thing. It's very challenging, and I understand the position that you say we're in. But one of my questions was throughout this report, at what point have you demonstrated that you have marketed Kirklees as a good provider to continue services providing at that home? Because at no point in that have you said that you've offered it out to other people with dementia to come into a Kirklees home. So that was very worrying to me. It was worrying about saying going out to private would be better. Well, it won't. It'll cost these families more and create even more burden on the council, because these families will be displaced and not be able to maintain or sustain being in these homes. And I also noted in the report that you did say that there was three or four inquiries. I don't believe were strong bids, but at no time did these people visit the homes to have a look at that. So I'm finding this really, really worrying, and I'm wondering, are we bordering on the line of being discriminatory under the Equality Act for people that do suffer with dementia? So these are just some key points. There might be something else I might come back in with, but I'm really, really worried at this time that we're not making the right decision. I think these homes should remain.
I have a question from Hanifa Darwin, but she's not here. Okay, so the next question comes from Councillor Tanisha Bramwell.
The campaigners for the dementia care homes, this is not the first fight they've had. They've already had a fight and won when there was a proposal to sell off the care homes, which was last year, which that was the wrong decision, and they fought and they won. Consultation took place, and these campaigners and these families fought hard to ensure that their voice was captured appropriately, and they did that tremendously in my eyes, absolutely tremendously, up day and night. They've now got another fight on their hands when it comes to the privatisation. I'm absolutely appalled. In my eyes, I feel like the council has made these mistakes before in its past. When the first cuts to service came 10 years ago, Kirklees Council sold off infrastructure. There's no long-term positive effects of selling off infrastructure at all. It has detrimental effects on services and local lives. There's no positives in it. So to then look at privatisation of these care homes, and by examples that's already been raised today, the budget and the amount that's paid by Kirklees Council, which is £859, that I was shown today, it does fall by CQC as inadequate, which can be seen as discrimination. Well, again, these are all points that have been made, but I think the biggest point that should be made is that this is the wrong decision, and this is evidenced because the cons outweigh the pros on this decision. And I urge the Cabinet to take into account everything they've seen, not just from this fight, but from last year, when these campaigners and these families made it their sole purpose to evidence that they cannot lose these care homes. I urge the Cabinet and the Council to reconsider this idea.
Thank you, Councillor Bramwell. Can I ask Councillor Cooper to put his question?
So here we are again. And Councillor Addy said that
she would be seeking to do was give the best way forward possible for residents. And I think the best way forward is the certainty and stability of staying in their own home. That is the best way forward. And I think a lot of the families would agree with that. And the real concern, of course, is that the private sector, with the profit motive that it has, will not provide the best care. It will be seeking to drive down wages, and there is a correlation between wages and the quality of care that is provided. And I believe that care workers ought to be paid well. I believe that Kirklees is a good employer and recognises the quality of care that staff provide. And that is something that we should be proud of. And it should be one of the things which is the flagship of what Kirklees is. People don't say, oh, I want Kirklees to be in charge of our roads, I want Kirklees to be in charge of... This is something that people want Kirklees to be in charge of. Let's hold that up and protect it. So what is the way forward here? And I think there's my view on this is that things change. Things change as we go on. We know that there are things that are going to happen over the next... I remember the saying, things could only get better. I'm of that view. I'm an optimistic sort of person. I believe that things will get better and that finances for local government cannot be left in the perilous state that they actually are. And if that is the case, we're going to have a government settlement that's going to happen in November, December. Maybe we'll have more money. Maybe we'll be given more flexibility in the ways that we raise wages. And so my question that would raise finance for the council. So my question is, if the financial situation of the council gets better, will Castle Grange and Claremont House, and saving those to make sure that residents can remain in their homes, will that be top of the list for the council? Will it be high on the list for the council for a changed decision? Because if things get better, we should protect the things that are most important. And this is definitely one of the things that's most important.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Can I ask Councillor John Lawson, please?
Thank you, Chair. So I think there is an understanding that there's a place for private provision as part of the solution to adult social care and to dementia care. In various parts of council, there's always been private provision as part of the solution, and there always has been, there always will be. I do have a nervousness, however, about accountability in the private sector. They are subject to CQC investigations, of course, and assessments, but it's not the same day-to-day, it's not subject to the same day-to-day scrutiny from elected members as an authority provision. So I'll ask, how will that level of accountability be maintained? And how do we make sure that we do not fall into the trap of out of sight and out of mind with the people that we should be caring the very most about? There is a question about long-term solutions. When we talk about the private sector and looking at third-party provision, one of the issues there is we're seeing elsewhere in council where third-party provision is coming back in-house, where we've had to bring it back in-house. Well, that's costing us a lot of money, and a lot of heartache and a lot of anxiety. This is not one of the areas that we want to be doing that in. If we think it's bad in other areas, maybe like housing or something like that, this is an area that will be worse by quite a quantum. The last point I'd make, and the question I'd ask about this last point, is that staff are a key element in this equation. The relationships established between staff and the people who need the care are absolutely paramount. And there's a couple of things here. One is the idea of staff transfer. Do we have an idea of the costs involved with that, with TUPE and personnel costs involved with that? And the other is, has there been any assessment of the flight risk of some of the people who don't want to work in the private sector, who believe that this kind of care belongs in the authorities' control. What assessment has been made of that? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Can I now ask Councillor Khan to put her question?
Thank you, Councillor Pattison. I think this strategy is extremely high risk. It really concerns me. It only seems like yesterday we were celebrating the opening up of dementia care home being delivered in-house, and there were specific reasons of why we did that. We know the high needs people, high-end needs of dementia care require a lot more staff and 24-hour supervision, okay? And we know that's not profitable. And we know that it is not possible for the private sector to gain profit out of that, those high-end needs, and we won't have any legal standing to ensure that they take on these high-end needs, dementia care patients and clients. And we have, as a local authority, no powers to dictate what wages people are paid. We also know as a fact the quality of care is related to staff conditions such as wages, training, expertise, the stability, a lower turnout equals better quality services, and we will lose that power to affect those things. And it's such a delicate market. And as a previous portfolio holder, I'm well aware of any time the kind of problems that can occur within those high needs and dementia care, and how quickly and swiftly we need to step in and respond to concerns from the public, to reassure the public, and to put in measures to re-establish quality of care. Okay, that's not going to be possible. And I think we also looked at, I forget the name of one of the first councils that went bankrupt. One of the factors, key factors in that, was the privatisation of their care services and the council losing grip. It's okay, sat there nodding your head and squinting, but we actually looked at that at the time. Okay, not you, Councillor Addy. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Can I ask Councillor Safdar to put his question?
Once upon a time, I was a big advocate of free market economics. Privatisation seemed to work in certain sectors. However, we've seen recently with the huge fines placed upon the water boards that privatisation doesn't work. I've had a painful conversion. I've seen how private enterprises reduce standards of care and where their priority is profit. I've dealt with, coming from the business sector, the voluntary sector, being a carer myself, I've seen how there's a huge difference between public sector workers who go above and beyond, and Kirklees have many of them. I'm very proud of our frontline staff, our social workers who've helped me incredibly with my residents and family members. But the private sector, sadly, sometimes, despite CQC inspections, don't have that same level of compassion and care. So currently, Kirklees are paying £1,290 per person per week to run Castle Grange and Claremont House. And the proposal is that Kirklees only want to pay £853. So they want to try to get away with paying less to a private provider. So those costs, who's going to subsidise those extra costs? Residents are going to be left with £437 per week per resident. That's extremely concerning. So how do Cabinet, and I sympathise, Councillor Addy, I do sympathise that there are cutbacks, the 14 years of misrule by the Brexit far-right government sadly led to massive economic problems. I sympathise, but as a democratic socialist party, how can we continue promoting, how can the party opposite continue promoting privatisation It's not worked with the railway sector. It's not worked in the care sector. It's certainly not worked in the water sector. So we urge Cabinet to reconsider these proposals. This care should be kept within the council. I agree with Councillor Lawson, other Councillor Lawson, Councillor Brownwell and Councillor Cooper that this service must be kept run by the people, by the People's Council. And I sympathise greatly with I empathise with the anxiety and the pain, the sleepless nights that the wonderful campaign team are they're going through right now. So, last question. So, I know you've been given a lot of questions, Councillor Addy. I do sympathise. It must be a tough job. How do Cabinet plan to subsidise any stark increases by these private firms? Okay. Has anyone explored the possibility that the private providers may lumber the residents' parents, children, with extra fees?
Thank you, Councillor Shasta. Can I ask Councillor Andrew Pinnock to put his question?
Thank you, Chair. This is a very simple question, and it's based on a phrase that Councillor Addy used in her opening statement. And she used the phrase high quality providers. And I would like a definition, please, of what in this context, and we're talking about dementia care in this context, is a high quality provider. And I suppose as an add-on to that, can it be found in the private sector, or is it solely in the public or the third sector? I don't know. I mean, I personally think that putting this care into something other than council operation is dodgy, shall we say, for whatever reason. And I would just like to know what criteria are going to be used in order to assess whether an operator is of sufficient quality in every single aspect of their work to take this on. Thank you.
Sorry.
Right, please bear with me. They may not be in the order you asked.
I beg your pardon, sorry. I'm getting confused. I have got one last speaker, which is Councillor Smage. I am not going to take any more questions from Councillor Safdar or Councillor Khan. You've already both spoken on this issue. And this is questions and comments. It's not a debate. So I'll ask Councillor Smage to put her question.
I've gone very small.
Okay. No, sorry. No, I mean, this is gone, we've had a long, a lot of questions on this.
Leader, can I just say, you've got 23 councillors, you're a minority administration.
I'm sorry, that
now,
is nothing to do
never
with
mind
the
about
decision that we've got
consultation,
today.
but you're not even allowing us an adequate voice in here. This is the only place we have a voice. You're undermining democracy by closing us down. This is a serious undermining of democracy. You're a minority administration.
That is not a question on this paper. I'll ask Councillor Smage to put her question, and then I will close the debate and ask Councillor Addy to respond.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a quick question, actually. Can you let us know, please, how the Cabinet, through this process, is going to ensure that the homes remain specialist dementia care? Can you please, because that's what we need in Kirklees, is specialist dementia care. So can you please outline how you are going to ensure that that carries on, please? Thank you.
Councillor Addy, please, would you respond to those questions?
Yep. As I said, please bear with me, and I will recap and go back if I've missed anything. A lot of questions, but very much on a lot of the same feelings and debates and issues. So, in March, we had the option to close or to look to sell, and we kept the sell on the table and said we would keep these homes open. We invested in their future till now, and we're investing in their future to get to the point of finding a good quality provider. Our homes are rated good, and that's the sort of quality mark we will be looking for. We will be looking for an established provider who can provide quality care. These are not the only dementia care homes in Kirklees. There are dementia care homes across Kirklees in the private sector providing good care. Most people are in those. So people are making a profit out of providing good quality care. That is the kind of provider we'll be looking for. If magic money comes from somewhere and it's suddenly found, I think, was that you, Councillor Cooper? No, it's okay, just nod.
No, I wasn't talking about magic money, I was talking about real money.
If money can be found suddenly of the volume that we would need, I think as Kirklees we should be looking to do something across the care sector, not for 2 care homes. If we could raise fees for carers who are at the heart of our provision in every sense, inside care homes, in people's own homes, yes, then that would be the time to look to raise those fees, and therefore that could be passed on by providers to carers, and it would attract the very best. But we do have lovely carers in our care homes, in the private care homes, who do provide good care. But when that time comes, I will be looking to do something that will provide a raising of care, a raising of provisions across Kirklees. There is a growing need for dementia care. And bearing in mind, these are care homes specialising in dementia, or dementia care homes. They are not specialist dementia care homes. They are the same level of dementia care that is offered in the private sector already across our region and beyond. But there is a growing need for dementia care. So the idea that homes will be picked up and then tried to turn into something else by a dementia care provider isn't something that we're looking at, because these providers need more space. We need more places. We will, in our negotiations, look to the immediate future. And of course, we can't look beyond that. Nobody has that power. But we will be looking to make the very best situation, reminding you that the alternative was to sell these homes, meaning that residents and the staff would not be in those jobs and not be in their homes anymore. This way, there is every future, there is a good future for people in those homes, and staff have the opportunity to continue there. You raise the issue of the CQC, who have actually come under inspection themselves. And yes, I want to see the best checks kept, and so I want to see what comes out of that. But at the moment, we are where we are, and this is where we're at with these. We will be talking to families, we will be talking to care providers, we will be looking for the best possible future. If I've missed something, please send me an email and I'll send you it in writing. If I've missed something significant that you think I should have answered, I'm just looking through my notes, I might have, because there was a lot of, I probably should have taken them one at a time, but there were a lot of different questions. I'm hoping I've covered all of them for you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Patterson, could I please come in? I did indicate, and I do, and thank you, Councillor Addy, for your comprehensive answers. I do appreciate that. However, each agenda item isn't time limited to when people can ask questions, and this is about people's lives. It's really, really important. And whilst Councillor Addy has answered some of it, I do think the families and people that have come today should be allowed the opportunity to talk on that. As a councillor, I have a right to come and talk as long as I want on an item, not when you say you've talked once, that's it. It doesn't work like that. This is to be talked out. It's about people's lives.
As I had already indicated to Councillor Safdar and Khan, they'd already had an opportunity to speak, and when I saw your light come on, You had already had an opportunity to speak.
With all due respect, I did say to you, I'm starting this, but I will come back. If you go back in the recording, it did say I would be coming back to say something. But I appreciate what Councillor Addy said, but yet again, democracy isn't prevailing because we're being suppressed.
Democracy is not being suppressed, and I will go to the recommendations of this report, which just to remind people what the recommendations here are.
Councillor Pattison, can I ask a question then, please?
No, you can't ask a question, Councillor Khan. I will go to the recommendations.
Is it democratic that 23 out of 69...
Khan, this has got nothing to do with the item on the agenda, and if you continue with that line of questioning, I will ask you to leave. Thank you. Can I please just remind everyone here, because I think it's rather important...
I'm sorry, but you don't have a majority. You can't ask someone to leave. She's the voice of her residents.
I'm sorry, Councillor.
No, I'm sorry.
I certainly, as chair of this cabinet, of this council, I do have the right to ask any other councillor who is being disruptive to do so, to leave the chamber.
I don't think she's being disruptive. All she's doing is raising a valid point. This is on the agenda. That's all we're all doing, is raising valid points on the agenda. This is the agenda set out by your council, and we're here speaking on it as councillors.
We have listened to the points that you raised. I'm sorry if you failed to raise them all in your initial submission, but we will now listen to what the recommendations are that Councillor Addy is proposing. And you will notice from these recommendations that there is plenty of opportunity still for consultation, discussion, both with the care home residents, their families, the staff.
However, the consultation that was done in the first year was not listened to, because had it been listened to, there would be no privatisation now.
Please will you stop interrupting, or else I will have to ask you to leave. Right. So the recommendations are to note an update on progress, agree that we undertake an adequate consultation for 6 weeks with staff and families about this proposal, to transfer, not to close, one or both homes to a private sector operator. Agree that we can progress negotiations to a point of being able to enter into a contract with an alternative provider, subject to final agreement by the Cabinet. Approve the carrying out of consultation on the principles of the proposal and delegate authority to the Service Director for Mental Health, Learning Disabilities and Provider Services to agree the nature and scope of such consultation. Councillor Addy, is that what you were proposing?
It is.
Can I have a seconder, please? Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Crook. Those recommendations have been agreed. We will now pass on to the next item on the agenda. Oh, sorry, can I take a vote on it?
You have moved it to the vote.
Can we move? Thank you. That was carried. Can we now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is councillors' devolved ward budgets, updated criteria and decision-making process. Councillor Turner.
Chair, thank you. This report seeks Cabinet approval to tighten up the rules around the use of the members' ward budget. The details of the new decision-making process can be found in Appendix A of today's report. When money is tight, we need to ensure the ward budgets are used wisely and are used where possible to act as seek or to attract external funding. The changes proposed in today's papers will help ensure the best use of the reduced ward members' budget. Chair, can I ask Cabinet to approve the changes as set out in Appendix A of today's papers?
We have 3 councillors who wish to speak on this matter. Councillor Cooper, Lawson, and then Councillor Smage. So Councillor Cooper first, please.
It's sometimes handy to have a bit of carryover from your budget for ward budgets. I mean, some were accumulating some rather large ones. Fortunately, in the Newsham ward, we didn't hand any money back to the council. It was all allocated for local projects, so we weren't part of the £300,000 that was handed back. What does concern me about this is that if there are any changes to the ward budget, it's by senior officers, the Deputy Chief Executive and I think the Director of Public Health, which is the same person, I think. So, in consultation with a cabinet member, and I look at that and I think, actually, isn't it the cabinet members that ought to be making the decision? Isn't it the councillors who ought to be making the decision? Actually, I believe it ought to be a decision that ought to be taken at full council, actually, because it's a budget that happens that all councillors are involved in. So an officer making a decision in consultation with a councillor, that sounds like we're heading down a strange rabbit hole here of who's responsible for things in a democratically elected body.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor, is this Joe Lawson or John Lawson? John Lawson. John Lawson.
That'd be me, Chair. Thank you. Yeah, I agree with the previous speaker. I agree with Councillor Cooper. There is a question around the future decision making around ward budgets. We certainly need more input from the rest of council, and I'd like to know what thoughts have been sort of put forward about how that might look and any alternatives. I'd also like to know at the moment what proportion of the clawback that's been suggested, what proportion of that clawback was set aside money but not yet committed. Because I know in our own ward we did spend most of the money, you'll be glad to know, but what I do know is that sometimes you set aside money for longer term projects, things that cannot be managed in 1 year. We've all come across them in our wards, and they do take long-term commitment of funds, as you'll well understand with the budget. So what proportion of that money do you think falls into that category, that long-term projects have had the rug pulled from under them? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Councillor Smage.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with the comments on the longer term plans for ward budgets, because very often you are wanting a larger project and you need money from several years to be able to affect that project. But also it is, if we have a shortness of notice, that ward budgets are suddenly going to be pulled back. Because you can be about to do something and in actual fact you're stopped from doing that, which is what happened in our case. So that does concern me. But my main question on this is, this report is on ward budgets. And under ward councillors consulted, it says none. Can I ask why on a report on ward budgets, why Cabinet are taking a decision on criteria, etc., on budgets without first speaking to ward councillors and how that might affect their approach to how they want to move forward with the monies that they have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smage. Councillor Turner, would you like to reply?
Certainly, Chair. I think they've all three people have questioned the carryover. If you noticed, there was a lot of money that got clawed back because people weren't spending it. As you well know, the finances of the council are tight, going to be tight next year. So we have to make sure every penny we have is used wisely, and it seems to me wrong to have nearly £500,000 sat in a bank account when we were looking to cut services. So that's the reason we took that decision not to roll it over last year. It's all right saying carry over. How long do we carry it over? How much are you allowed to carry it over? Where's the evidence you're going to carry it over for a project? What happens if that project doesn't fail? This is a very simple, straight line. If you haven't spent it by the end of the year, unfortunately, that gets absorbed back into the general budget. Why haven't council been consulted with this criteria? This is quite clearly a cabinet decision. It's a decision of cabinet to devolve the budget to councillors and set the criteria. This is not wholesale change to the existing criteria. It is simply tightening up of the processes, ensuring fairness and transparency in decision making.
Thank you, Councillor Turner.
Can I just question that for a second? That response? Because you said it's a cabinet decision. It's not what it says in the report. It says in the report that it's going to be the Deputy Chief Executive in consultation with the cabinet member. The cabinet members are going to be lucky they're going to be consulted. I mean, I think the cabinet system's rubbish anyway, but I think at least a cabinet member should be consulted, should have the decision to make over how ward budgets are allocated.
Just to clarify, that was a response to Councillor Smage's question about why ward councillors hadn't been consulted. It clearly does say that any decision in excessive spend will be taken with cabinet members and the chief exec, and that's the right way. The cabinet member, whoever they may be at the time, may need some legal advice or some long-term advice, but the ultimate decision will rest with the cabinet member.
That's not what it says in the report.
Councillor Cooper, thank you, Councillor Turner. You're moving that recommendation?
Yes, of course.
Councillor Pattison, I've had this button pressed from the start and I've not been given the opportunity to speak, please.
Sorry, you haven't. It's not been notified to me that you were speaking. But okay. Yes, if you've had, it would help if you could actually nudge the the clerk, please. But anyway, put your question.
Right. Okay. Mine again. I mean, somebody's mentioned it. It's in relation to 6.1.3, delegating to officers. Again, I feel this will undermine democracy, any local decision making. Often over the last 10 years I've been a ward councillor, we've made local decisions in our ward, tackled poverty when it's not been a key priority prior to it being a key priority. So it takes away our ability to respond to our residents' needs directly, because we know that each ward is unique, and the needs of the people are very, very much different from place to place. And I welcomed that place-based approach, and I feel it's moving a step away from that by delegating decisions to senior officers and one cabinet member.
Councillor Turner, do you want to reply to that?
I believe we've already answered that.
Okay, thank you. Well, we've already had the recommendation moved by Councillor Turner. Is that seconded, please? Thank you, Councillor Crook. Can I see those in favour, please? Thank you. That's carried. We'll now move on to the item 9 on the agenda, which is fleet replacement and investment. Councillor Munir Ahmed.
Thank you, Leader. The purpose of the report is to seek Cabinet approval to proceed with the expenditure of, which are in the recommendations, but I'll just go through some of those, £21.7 million from the agreed capital plan for the vehicle replacement programme, supporting critical fleet replacement and transformation models over the next 6 years forecast. This is an invest to save proposal and approach to managing fleet efficiencies. 3.26 million to replace the waste and recycling hired fleets with a capital purchase, supporting the reduction of the council's expensive fleet hire costs by generating a fleet whole life cost saving model, removing a reliance on unreliable hire fleets and providing frontline operational stability and capitalising fleet requirements. And a further £1.8 million to replace the current fleet of hired bulk gritting vehicles hired on an annual basis for the winter service gritting operations, with capital purchase fleet to achieve a financial savings from year 5, add flexibility for the future in terms of how the service could be delivered, which is a total of £26.76 million over 6 years. It's more important than ever that we review how we work and bring forward investment proposals such as this, that not only seeks to support important frontline service, such as waste collections and highways, but also reduces revenue burdens at the same time. The growth in some services and the age of some fleet has reached a point where we need a more strategic review to take us through the next few years, and this report represents that. We've been successful in growing our green fleet and infrastructure over the last few years, securing new technologies to trial and implement within the district, and have now developed the presented vehicle replacement program that will ensure that we replace fleet at right time before it starts impacting on the service delivery cost, and importantly minimises the environmental impact. This report is focused on the replacement of critical frontline fleet, bringing them up to the highest environment standards deliverable, whilst recognising the current limitations of green technology, introducing the latest Euro 6 standards to our HGV, for example, will reduce the nitrous oxide by around 55% when compared to the current Euro 5 vehicles. It also continues to deliver on Vision Zero, ensuring that we have the most up-to-date safety technology on our roads, and supporting this regional and national strategy to eliminate all traffic fatalities and severe injuries, a cause that I'm sure that we will all support. This is a significant investment, and it is important that it's not only spent in the right way, but that we actually and continually review it, and we move forward to ensure that we remain flexible to any changes in services and development in technology. A Green Fleet Board is being established to develop a strategic approach for transitioning to a green fleet. This board aims to align in the council's fleets with environment and government goals. The Green Fleet Board will explore options for green fleet transformation, including vehicle types, infrastructure needs, and potential cost implications. The goal is to create a comprehensive plan that outlines the council's green fleet ambitions, including a timeline and investment requirement. The vehicles that have been identified in the report are of the size where green technology and infrastructure is not mature enough at this stage to invest in at this scale. However, a phased approach to procurement is being taken to allow for the Green Fleet Board to review and develop the strategy, allowing us to evolve the technology we procure through the life of the programme. I welcome this report, its approach and support, and recommend the options within it.
Thank you, Councillor Ahmed. I have Councillor Cooper wanting to answer a question.
Thanks for the report, very comprehensive and quite interesting. I mean, one of the things you mentioned is that the market is not mature enough yet to get for for things like electric vehicles and the purchase of those. It is for some councils, and I think the reality is that it's just too expensive for us, and think the market is there, it's growing, but I think we should be honest and say actually at the moment we're a bit low on cash and we can't really do it. What we need to do is to have the ambition to get there and to work a plan to do it, and I'm pleased that there is something in place for that. But my question is about Vision Zero. So I'm interested what the safety features are in the vehicles which contribute towards Vision Zero.
Councillor Ahmed, do you want to come back, answer that question?
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. In terms of your first comments, I think you're quite right. The council, just to give people an indication of what we have done, the council did procure an electric bin wagon in order to use it around the district and understand its capabilities. And whilst it performs well within the urban environment, it struggled with some of the higher terrain and weather conditions. The infrastructure needed to charge these vehicles at scale insignificant, requiring power supply upgrades to depots, and it was not affordable and expensive at that time, so I take that on board. In terms of the Vision Zero safety vehicles, it's as set out in the report.
It isn't set out in the report. What are the features on the vehicles? That's why I asked.
Councillor Crook, did you want to come back on that?
Thanks. I mean, to answer your question about Vision Zero, I think we are absolutely committed to Vision Zero West Yorkshire wide, but in terms of modern vehicles having higher safety standards than older vehicles, that's something that you can easily look up and is a standard which is applied industry wide. It's not something which is applied by Kirklees Council. I mean, just to add a little bit more on your comments around the green credentials of a Euro 6 fleet, which is also capable to be upgraded to a new Euro 7 standard. That's about particulates, isn't it, largely? And we're talking about health improvements for our populations, particularly in the urban environment. Finance is clearly an issue when we're looking at procurement, but if you went straight to an electric fleet which wouldn't be able to cover all of our district, and you could only replace part of the fleet on that basis because of financial constraints, you would actually have an environmental deficit, not an environmental advantage. So just to back up what Councillor Ahmed has said on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. So Councillor Ahmed has moved the recommendations in the report. Can I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Crook. Can I see those in favour? Thank you. That is agreed. We will now move on to the Household Waste Recycling Centre efficiency savings. Councillor Ahmed.
Thank you, Leader. The purpose of this report is to seek Cabinet approval to make operational changes to the Household Waste Recycling Centres service, including the closure and the amendments to the opening hours. Specifically, the recommendations are that the Nab Lane Housing Waste Recycling Centre in Birstall is closed in late autumn winter, and that Bromley Farm, Upper Cumberworth, is closed Wednesdays and Thursdays in late autumn, and that the Meltham Recycling Centre is closed Mondays and Tuesdays. The plan to close Nab Lane Household Waste Recycling Centre and reduce the operating days at the other two sites offers the council a savings of nearly £200,000 over the next 2 financial years. And it's one of the many cost-saving measures being implemented across the council, as set out in the annual budget at the beginning of the year. There has been much debate around this and detailed discussions at scrutiny where I was present. This is not an easy decision, and it's one of the many the council is unfortunately having to take due to the financial challenges all local authorities are having to face. I felt it was important to listen to what was discussed at the scrutiny, and that I take time to review the facts of the proposals and visit the sites involved, which I have done. And I note that the Waste Recycling Recycling Plan, the Waste Resource Action Plan, RAP for short, guidance is a key document referenced in the report that allows us to measure these changes against others to ensure our services are comparable both locally and nationally. What is clear from the facts presented in the reports is the closure of Nab Lane would keep Kirklees at a level of service comparable to that of Leeds, Bradford and Wakefield. It's also clear that the remaining service continues to be compliant under the RAP guidance document, which, with the great majority of residents being within 5 miles and 20 minutes of a site. Having visited all of the 5 sites, I am convinced that there is a need to maintain high standards at these recycling centres we operate, and that the health and safety of the public is paramount. And upon my visit to Nab Lane, I share the concerns discussed at scrutiny over the site layout and the use of gantries or the stairs to reach the skips, which is completely unacceptable from a health and safety perspective. And it's a stark difference from the modern layout that the other sites, and notably Weaving Lane in Dewsbury, I now understand why it's the least used and the poorest performing site in the borough, handling only just over 3,245 tonnes each year and recycling only 41% of its waste. I feel residents will see the benefits of using a more modern facility at Weaving Lane, and this is before we see the construction of a new facility there by the Trans-Pennine rail upgrade at no cost to the council. So it's a win-win situation. Concerns around an increase in fly tipping has been considered, and most cases around the districts relating to commercial waste. However, I would like to reiterate that the council has a zero-tolerance approach to fly tipping, and any impact following a decision to close Nab Lane will be closely monitored and actions taken where appropriate. Overall, I feel the business case for this decision is sound and factual, balancing the impact on residents against the financial position of the council, and I support the recommendations and the options within the report.
Thank you, Councillor Ahmed. We have a few people who wish to speak on this. First off, we have a member of the public who wishes to ask a question. Richard, now I might have got this wrong, Madsen?
Richard Hodgson.
Beg your pardon.
It's okay, no problem. I've been a Kirklees resident now for 70 years, living in Dewsbury for 59 years, and in Birstall and Birkenshaw area for the last 11 years. Been a regular user of both waste cycle sites, so I'm very aware of the situation in both. I must congratulate the officers who have actually put the report together. They've done an excellent report, well drafted and evidenced on the information provided. However, I have two main concerns. One of which, to get to this stage, obviously a lot of time and effort has been expended. Very little or no consultation has been made with users like myself, or with local businesses, or with councillors. I'm informed by one of my local councillors that she was informed only 2 days before the report went to Cabinet by a local resident. No consultation was offered to me as a regular user, or, as far as I'm aware, any other local resident. My second point is alteration at Nab Lane to reduce costs, both proposed capital costs of £6.3 million and revenue costs. Have all the opportunities and alternatives been considered? And I would suggest no. As been a regular user of Nab Lane for the last 11 years, there is an opportunity of making savings through staff reduction. I have only on one occasion been offered assistance by one of the staff to carry garden waste in a large construction bag up the gantry, only on one occasion. I have learned how to do it. It's difficult, but I've done it myself. The operatives, as far as I'm aware, and again saying that I've regularly watched and seen what they do, I suggest that there's probably 3 or 4 operatives there. Savings could be made by about 50%. Also, has the site been looked at in terms of, yes, still complying with the RAP, not fully conversant with all the regulations and recommendations in RAP. However, one suggestion from the SUS management team up there was a simple approach to get rid of the gantry steps would be simply turn around the containers, allow the residents and businesses to put the waste in the containers from the front, to safely use the machinery that's already on site to compact as the containers start to becoming full, to use the machinery on site to actually push it to the back of the container to allow it to be relatively full. That would eliminate the use of gantries and steps. That would reduce considerably the capital expenditure of £6.3 million. And as a regular user for my first 59 years in Dewsbury, I would suggest it doesn't work very well for a car and a trailer in the layout that's proposed on the new development. And if that alternative, as I've suggested, was used, very little capital cost would be required. So, what I would suggest today is that because democracy hasn't been obtained, just as the previous report mentioned, or discussion in the previous report was mentioned, there had been no consultation with councillors on the allocation of their ward allocation for offers to the public, etc. I would suggest that this decision is deferred and brought back to a further cabinet meeting for a decision to be made. Once one consultation has been made and sought with local residents and businesses, and secondly, alternative provision at Nab Lane, as one example is what I've given, to reduce the capital cost, is considered. So that is my proposal today, that the decision is deferred to allow consultation on other alternatives to be sought and the report brought back to the Cabinet report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Hodgson. Councillor Ahmed, before I ask the other councillors to ask their questions, do you want to respond to Mr Hodgson?
Can I just very quickly just correct something? I'm sorry, Mr Hodgson. It was the officer decision where I only had 2 days, not the Cabinet report.
Thank you, Richard Hodgson, for a very extensive comments in terms of this. The first thing I'd like to say is that at the previous scrutiny call-in, there was very extensive discussions and details about this, and in terms of most of the arguments that you have presented, they were actually presented there as well. And one of the things that was highlighted was the lack of involvement with the residents and the ward members, and that was actually taken on board in terms of ensuring that we did do that. However, the business case as being put together is a very viable and sound business case. And under health and safety and RAP guidance, it's important that we get specialist advice from the specialist people who do this job. SUIs were asked to look into these options and consider the best options that were around in line with the efficiency savings, but also with the health and safety implications in terms of what we could do. And on those bases, those options are identified in the report, and they were there, and they have been considered, and RAP guidance and health and safety guidance are there. And in terms of the other comments that you've made, they have all been considered at the previous scrutiny call-in, and most of those issues have been resolved, and members have also been consulted as a result of that following the scrutiny call-in.
Can I respond to that, please?
Very briefly.
Very briefly. Yes, I was aware of scrutiny, but not actually officially consulted along with other residents. So I dispute the fact that residents and businesses have had the opportunity. And it was very, very short notice. Even today was very short notice as well. So as a resident, a regular user, a council taxpayer, I don't think we have been dealt with very democratically here. And if this decision goes forward, I think it's totally wrong. There should be greater consultation, and I suggest that not all the alternatives have been looked at, both on capital and on revenue as well. So therefore, I would contest some of those comments that were made by the Cabinet member.
Thank you, Mr Hodgson. I will now move to the Councillor Shear. Do you have a question you wish to put?
Well, it's not that much of a question, but more of a statement. I'm not just here now today as a councillor for Bursell and Birkinshaw, but as a representative of a community that is rightfully frustrated by the decisions coming out of this Labour Cabinet. Nab Lane is a facility that has served our community diligently and has become an integral part of how we manage waste responsibly. It's astonishing that we actually even need to debate this issue when thousands of residents signed a petition to keep the centre open. Now let's be clear, the Cabinet's decision to close Nab Lane reflects a pattern of neglect towards our constituents and their needs. The Cabinet Member for Environment has articulated a vision to improve the quality of life in our region through the Environment Strategy in the last full council. However, the proposed closure of the Birstall Waste and Recycling Centre directly contradicts this. Closing a vital facility will force our residents to travel greater distances, resulting in increased travel times and higher emissions. Is this truly the direction that you want to take with your environmental strategy? The promise to improve quality of life sounds all great on paper, but actions speak louder than words. How can this Cabinet claim to prioritise the environment and community welfare, while on the other hand proposing to close a centre that encourages responsible waste management? Instead of enhancing accessibility for our residents, the decision would force them to travel to Dewsbury, a longer journey that not only inconveniences them, but significantly increases vehicle emissions. The environmental impact is not just a secondary concern, it is at the core responsibilities that we have as leaders. By closing Nab Lane, we're effectively saying that convenience and sustainability doesn't matter. The increased travel time will lead to more pollution and a heavier toll on an already strained environment through fly tipping, which is already a significant issue across North Kirklees. If you genuinely care about your ecological footprint, then you must provide our community with the necessary tools to manage our waste effectively, not create barriers that discourage proper recycling practices. Councillor Ahmed, you've just said that the council has a zero tolerance approach to fly tipping, and if Nab Lane is closed, you say it's closely monitored. Well, I invite you to come and have a trip down Bankwood Way at Junction 27, because I can tell you now, the council does not have a zero tolerance approach to fly tipping.
Thank you, Councillor Sheard. I now have Councillor Joe Lawson.
Sorry, I've still got a few more comments to make, if that's all right.
Oh, sorry, I thought you'd finished.
No, thank you. I asked at the last full council if the council had conducted an environmental risk assessment in the event of a Nab Lane closure. I didn't get an answer then. I'd appreciate an answer now if you don't mind. I'd also like to ask if it has been taken into consideration the volumes of traffic that will be going from across North Kirklees to Dewsbury once Nab Lane's been shut. I just want to actually mention accountability as well, because democracy has been brought up quite a lot of times in this Cabinet debate today. The Cabinet, this council, has continually ignored the voices of residents in North Kirklees. The council has failed to correctly consult ward councillors and residents when the proposal was first announced. And now, to add to that, the council has refused to accept the petition against the closure of the tip that I presented at the last full council. Ignoring thousands of residents, and this isn't just an oversight, it's an affront to the democratic process. It sends a clear message that this Labour Council is refusing to listen, and it does not respect the views of the very people that it claims to serve. Ignoring concerns of thousands of people undermines our credibility as elected officials and alienates those very people that we represent. Time and time again, Burstall and Berkinshaw and the wider North Kirklees community has found itself in this exact position, where this Cabinet is proposing to threaten our community facilities with closure, and where basic needs like waste and recycling facilities are being torn away from us. All yet while Huddersfield is being pumped with millions of pounds. I think the Cabinet needs to sit back, look at themselves and ask themselves, what are their true commitments to our community? Are you actually going to truly, willingly listen and respond to the needs of the constituents that we represent, or are you simply going to sit there and go through the motions? The failure to acknowledge the overwhelming opposition to this closure is a glaring indication that this Labour Cabinet is out of touch with the realities of our community, and it simply does not care about Burstall, Berkinshaw, East Biley and the whole of North Kirklees. I urge right now each and every single one of you to reconsider this decision. Stand up for the residents again that you claim to represent and reject this proposal to close Nab Lane. Demonstrate that you are not just a council of words, but one of action. Action that prioritises our community's needs and environmental responsibilities. A council that actually listens to the people that it says it represents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sheard. I just would point out that the petitions that you raised have been accepted. They didn't raise the 3,000 number which is needed to take to a debate in full council. But I'll ask Joe Lawson Councillor Joe Lawson to ask her question.
I think it might have actually been Councillor John Lawson, but since I've actually got the microphone, is Councillor Ahmed seems to believe that there's a zero tolerance to fly tipping. Well, come down the Walpole estate and actually ask the residents there. Come along to Thornton Lodge. Again, I can take you round fly tipping things there, but you seem to be unable to tell us what work Kirklees is doing in hotspots to actually avoid this. And I would also, the closure of a tip makes me also extremely worried for the fact that it will end up with more fly tipping in the various areas. And thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. I have got John Lawson as well. It's just you're on my list first. And Councillor Smage is next. Thank you.
Thank you. I absolutely agree with my colleagues' comments. And we'll just add a couple of points, please. The report talks about cross-border agreements, and it talks about the RAP guidance in relation to distances. It does seem that the RAP guidance is applied for the pro arguments, but the against arguments, the RAP guidance is vague. So the report states that the distances are comparable, even though it states that for some residents the Weaving Lane site is outside the recommended distance. It seems the RAP guidance is taken as read, as I've said, in some parts but not in others. The Lawmore facility is closer for residents in Burslem, Birkenshaw and Cleckheaton than the Weaving Lane site. So how can we be assured that you are applying the RAP guidance evenly across all of your arguments? The question is there. There's also a school of thought that the council want to release the land rather than having the tip, and several suggestions have been made. One of which is that the council wishes to sell the land. Is the council more interested in what the land is worth than services to residents? I would also ask about your comment on zero fly tipping. We have asked for cameras to be placed in 2 locations where we have a lot of problems, as well as the Bankwoods. And we have just really not received any positive replies in that respect. All we've come across is difficulties. And therefore, I would ask, if you have a zero fly tipping policy, why don't you have a strong enforcement as well? Because it is not just building waste that gets fly tipped. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smage. Can I ask Councillor Thompson to put his question?
Thank you, Chair. Many of the items have been covered, so what I'd like to do is just go into some numbers that the Cabinet member has suggested, reference to the savings by closing the tip initially, which were, I think he mentioned, nearly 200,000. I think the exact figure was 194,000 over 2 years, and this year was 54,000, I believe. It seems strange that the council has a budget for environmental and climate change at 2024-25 of £325,000 and next year of £500,000, with a total capital budget for clean and green up to 2030 of £65 million. What I would like to know is, closing a tip, what is clean and green about closing the tip? What is clean and green about forcing residents as far as 12 miles away to another tip that they're going to have to queue for twice as long with an engine running and then drive back? What is clean and green? Surely out of the budget of 65 million, there could be money found to keep that tip open and prevent us from burning more fuel, more time, more energy, and going and having another tip excessively used rather than keeping one that's already operational going. As far as the reports are concerned about health and safety, it was already told to us to bring it up to a standard where it could continue to be used would be as little as £54,000, not the £7 million for a complete refurbishment. So what I'd like to know is, as far as the environmental and climate change budget and the officer, what would resemble or what would come close to be clean and green by closing this tip and forcing people miles away from where they live to do the same thing that they could do just round the corner? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Can I ask Councillor John Lawson to put his question?
Thank you, Chair. On fly tipping, I do anticipate there being an increase in fly tipping, but I don't think it will be from the people who are currently using the actual resource itself, the HWRC itself. What I think will happen, though, is it will make a target of the residents around who do use that that resource. It will make a target of them, those who are most vulnerable, to the organised fly tippers who are rife over the borough and are basically a pestilence on our borough. Is it not time that we have a regional approach to our waste and recycling? Is it not time that WICA stepped in? Is it not time that we lobbied them and said, look, we are desperately in need of a regional approach to what we do with our waste and recycling? I can think of the argument that we had that seemed to have been one about a biodigester being present in the borough, and us not taking that up because we thought there were separate arrangements that we could make with neighbouring authorities. Is there not a similar approach that we could have made with this? In the west of my borough, there is Brighouse. There's a site in Brighouse that was much, much closer to than Weaving Lane. In the north, towards Bristol and Birkenshaw and East Byley, there are sites in Low Moor which are much, much closer and would be much less damaging environmentally. I'll finish with, I'm not going to repeat everybody else's comments, but although I do agree with them, but I will say this. Do we not find that one of our constituencies is now without an HWRC, a household waste and recycling centre, is now without that? Do we not find that frankly embarrassing?
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. I've one last speaker, which is Councillor Bolt, who is online. So if you're still there, Councillor Bolt, yes, you are. Would you like to put your question?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And it's quite appropriate then to follow Councillor John Lawson, who raises the issue of cross-border working. I'm dialing in today from my place of employment, which is Morley Town Council. And our town councillors had raised with Mayor Brabin the issue of cross-border access to household waste some time ago, under the same reason that many of our residents, being a very short distance away from Nab Lane, had to travel excessive distances. Mayor Brabin refused to take a strategic approach on that. So it's interesting that John raises that. In the report as well, some of the figures, I believe, are questionable. Yes, you can put a pin in a map in Cleckheaton and say it's X number of miles to Oakenshaw and Y number of miles to Weaving Lane. But equally, as John and his colleagues will know, the Cleckheaton ward stretches up Oakenshaw, where you are less than a mile from the Oakenshaw household waste site, and consequently 7 miles from Weaving Lane, during which anybody from Oakenshaw seeking to access Weaving Lane has to cross the chain bar roundabout at peak periods, if that's their time of travel, go through Cleckheaton, through an air quality management area in Liversidge, in the Liversidge and Gummersall ward at the Swan traffic lights, through Heckmondwike, and then out to Dewsbury. When Kirklees began with its air quality action plan and other aspects, we were assured by the Cabinet at the time that air quality impact and environmental impact would form a part of the report. So where is the element of that shows what difference all the volume of traffic from the residents of Oakenshaw, Birstall, etc., travelling to Weaving Lane will have on those communities? And crucially, having used Weaving Lane on many occasions, there is insufficient capacity, I think, on site to cope with additional flow of traffic. So additional traffic seeking to use the Weaving Lane site will probably be queuing up back onto the public highway. which I think is a poor system. So yeah, the figures are wrong in terms of travel, and I think a strategic approach where just because you are in one authority, you should be able to use the nearest household waste site. We should be able to have a reasonable balancing assumption with others, but also the fact that there is no environmental impact report about the volume of traffic, etc., I think shows a flawed report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Bolt. Councillor Ahmed, would you like to come back?
Thank you. In terms of the options that have been considered, they are detailed in the report, but SUEZ, who are the contractors and specialist providers, not just here, but nationally and globally, did come up with a number of options, and they were to do nothing, or the closure of Nab Lane only, or to reduce closure of Nab Lane as well as reduce that. And the whole purpose was twofold. One was obviously efficiency savings, but the second was health and safety, and I think people seem to have disregarded the whole option, the aspect of the RAP guidance and the health and safety. So health and safety is paramount in everything, and that's one of the reasons why the Nab Lane site is not fit. It is fit as it is at the moment, but if it was to be re-procured, it would not be fit in terms of for it to be proceeding further. And we've also got, as far as the business case is concerned, a financial benefit in terms of the Weaving Lane site, where the TransPennine upgrade are actually going to be providing an absolutely a new house waste cell recycling site, which will be equivalent to £7 million at no cost to the council, and that's an important factor. In terms of the petitions, I think the leader has responded to that, and I was going to respond to say that those petitions have been accepted, Councillor Sheard. I know that they didn't meet the threshold, but that doesn't mean that they're not being accepted. They have been accepted, they've just not been debated in terms of here. I'm just looking at the comments that were made. In terms of neighbouring sites, I think a number of comments have been made about cross-border working and why we can't use those as opposed to Kirklees because they're closer. The report contains distance and travel information on this, and it shows the distance of Weaving Lane was comparable to all neighbouring sites. In addition, these authorities would... This is the most important factor, that if we were to enter into negotiations, the authorities would have required us to financially contribute to operating these sites, which would have meant no savings would have been achieved. So it would have become more expensive in terms of that. Fly tipping, I think a majority of you, not all of you, have mentioned the issue of fly tipping. I also have the same issue with fly tipping on my ward as well. And I think the zero tolerance is there. We all need to make sure that we are going to be monitoring this carefully and make sure that we actually do inform the council. And we, at the moment, as it stands in terms of the performance, are trying to resolve as many fly tipping concerns as possible, but they're continually going to be there. So please, work with us in terms of making sure that that zero tolerance means reporting it, and we will prioritise it, the council will prioritise it and deal with that. And finally, in terms of just the closure considered in terms of the RAP guidance, the guidance did discuss this, but didn't, the guidance does discuss this, but it did not set any specific criteria around it, only that there should be consideration to the site usage. And the proposed days have been decided upon the partnership with SUEZ, who operate the sites and understand the usage patterns in detail. I think that's about most of the comments that I could respond to. And the caveat is, please, if any of those comments have not been responded to, please email me and I will make sure that I can respond to those afterwards.
Councillor Turner would like to come in on this.
Chair, thank you. Just for the to remove the doubt that some people have about this, there's absolutely no conversations about the value of the land or what may be future done with it. It has played no part whatsoever in this process.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. So you're moving that, Councillor Ahmed? Councillor Crook is seconding that. Can I see all those in favour? Thank you very much. That's carried. We will now move on to car parking charges and restrictions for resident parking permits and currently free off-street car parks. Councillor Ahmed, are you ready to go?
Thank you, Leader. This report is seeking the approval of a new set of proposals for resident parking permit charges for currently free off-street park, which have been developed after consultation with local residents, businesses, elected councillors and local organisations in recent months. So specifically, the proposals are to approve the resident and visitors parking permit proposals that are included in Appendix 1 to the report, which is page 63, just for those of you that have got the report. Note and consider the findings of the integrated impact assessment, to approve the new parking charges, the tariffs and the restrictions, including the 2-hour parking charge in 15 car parks as set out in Appendix 2, which is page 65 to this report, and annual charges for residential parking permits. To approve the existing traffic regulation order is amended as advertised to enable the changes to the application for and the issue of permits, including the introduction of virtual permits, negating the need for a physical permit to be displayed in the vehicle. To delegate future decision-making regarding revisions to the parking charges to relevant executive directors in consultation with the relevant portfolio holder. The debate over the changes to parking services within Kirklees has been ongoing for some time, and there was a commitment made by this administration to pause the previous proposal and review it considering the feedback received from councillors, residents and local businesses. This was my first council meeting and as the portfolio holder for Environment and Highways. And I can assure you that I listened closely to the emotions and the sentiments of the members as well as the wishes of the residents, businesses and town centre commuters. The new proposals that I present today has had careful consideration, taking on board the engagement and the consultation feedbacks received. It has sought to recognise that there is an additional income target of just over £1 million within our medium-term financial plan that was approved by the Council earlier this year, as well as the potential impact that these changes would have on the borough. This report proposes to introduce charges at only 15 car parks out of 57. Previously, it was all the car parks, so it's 15 out of 57, which have 25 spaces or more, in a way that it focused on protecting the local businesses by offering the first 2 hours free, but charging for those who stay longer. A cost of £1.60 for 4 hours, for example. I feel that is now, and it does represent, a right balance. For residential permits, there is still a change from the current scheme, which was not sustainable because it hadn't been increased for a number of years, but a lower cost of £35 for residents. The original proposal was £50 and £60 for visitors. This is comparable with neighbouring authorities such as Calderdale and Bradford, and there will also be a 30% reduction on this cost for Kirklees passport holders, so they will benefit from that as well. The introduction of virtual permits will also bring a streamlined approach to the current method, allowing residents to quickly and easily change details online. The system is being developed and will be introduced when ready, so it's not up and ready at the moment, but it will be shortly. I will also like to highlight the amended Appendix 2 on page 65. This specifically changes the Murfield Station car park from a 4-hour limit to all day. I had recognised the feedback received from ward councillors on this, but on reflection I felt there is sufficient parking in other locations in the town centre to accommodate retail, and the impact on commuters would create a wider issues within the area should these commuters be displaced in neighbourhood streets. These proposals will generate an anticipated income of £279,110 for permits and £152,588 for car parks, which is a total of just over £431,000. This does, though, represent a shortfall of £570,000 because we were just over £1 million that was needed when compared to the medium-term financial project in March. It's something that we will have to take into consideration in forthcoming budgets. I hope that my fellow councillors councillors and residents welcome these proposals, and I support the recommendations made within this report.
Thank you, Councillor Ahmed. I have got two members of the public who wish to speak, but Councillor Khan has asked if she may go first as she needs to leave. So, Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I want to make a request in terms of parking permits in the Rawthorpe and Town and Springbank estates. And I understand the need to increase charges, and I know that they haven't been visited since 2013. But there are special considerations for Rawthorpe Town and Springbank estates. And now I'll outline 3 reasons why the council needs to consider what they're doing in those areas. Firstly, point 1.1 of the report states that resident and visitor permit parking, residential permit parking schemes are introduced in areas where residents have difficulty parking within the vicinity of their home for the majority of the day. Now, this doesn't apply to those areas because, as you know, as Councillor Hawking knows, as a Dalton Ward councillor, and yourself, Councillor Ahmed, as a Dalton Ward councillor, the residents only have difficulties during match days and when there's concerts on. So they don't really strictly fit in the criteria for permit parkings. However, the second point I want to raise is that this parking issue wouldn't exist if the council hadn't built the stadium in the early 1990s. The stadium was built without any recompense for any of the residents, without consideration of impact on them of having events and having football. And the council has financially benefited in millions over the years to the detriment of the residents living there. The inconvenience, the littering, the noise it causes residents in Rawthorpe and Town Estate and Springbank. And the council didn't exercise its corporate responsibility for those residents. And I believe that restitution is owed to those residents in those areas. And as my Dalton Ward colleagues know, this is a third point, that this is one of the poorest areas in Kirklees, and that with the cost of living, I mean, even before the cost of living, people struggle on a daily basis to put food on the table. These increases in charges are going to have a massive detrimental effect. For example, the visitors there wasn't a visitors parking permit charge previously, and now it's proposed that it's £60 per person. Often the parents are both working, and bus services have been reduced in the area as well, so they're reliant on cars. And most households have 2 cars. And this cost, I do appreciate the consultation, it's brought the costs down. But what I'm asking the Cabinet today is to rethink this blanket policy and just to take a place-based approach and look at the special extenuating circumstances in that particular area. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Khan. Will you come back on that, Councillor Ahmed?
I'll respond to that now, if
Yeah.
that's okay. Is that okay? Thank you for your input, Councillor Khan. As you know, in our ward briefing with the officers, which I was present along with Councillor Hawkins as well, Councillor Hawkins highlighted the town estate and those permit parking areas which are in the proximity to the John Smith Stadium, and we completely agree with that, and the unique pressures that they're under in relation to the stadium and the parking permit situation there. Officers at that meeting agreed to look into what allowances can be made in these areas to offset the impact of the nearby stadium. So they are still considering and looking into that. That has not happened. So that's an issue which had only just recently happened, and that has been and is being looked into.
Thank you, Councillor Ahmed. I will now ask Amanda Gray if you'd like to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. First of all, I maintain that increasing the permit parking charges is in effect a breach of contract. My car park permit, my parking permit, is currently £15 for as long as I own that vehicle and reside at that address. Were I to go and apply for a new permit today, the end date for that is the 31st of January 2065. That would definitely see myself and a lifetime of my car out. No problem at all on that. The permit parking changes have not been increased for 10 years, and therefore I maintain that that is custom and practice for it to be £15 for a residential permit, and to do anything different is in effect a breach of contract between the council and permit holders. If you wish to increase the cost of permits, you should therefore only apply it to those requiring new permits. So whenever anybody requires to get a new permit, they would pay the new rate, and I would maintain that that is similar to employees' existing terms and conditions, and an employer making different terms and conditions for new employees. What I am most concerned about is the move towards virtual permits. In your documentation, you say that this will enable a more secure and reliable system. I find that really worrying, that the current system is not secure and not reliable, because it requires you to upload your V5 documentation and details of where you live. I would have hoped that was extremely secure and reliable. And also online, you are currently able to apply for a permit and update any details pertaining to that permit. So I don't really see where you're coming from by building a new system, and where those savings are going to come. Furthermore, if you do not have a permit displayed in your car, anybody can see that my car is legitimately parked in a permit zone, in the correct zone. We are plagued by people who park on an evening, who come to visit friends on a weekend. You go out to the shops, you can't get parked when you get back. I've paid for my permit. People's visitors have not, and they even have a drive on which their friends can park. This I find really annoying. I also, as a responsible citizen, not only do I report fly tipping, I report people parking without a permit where I can do that. I report abandoned vehicles. I report vehicles that are for sale outside the Junction pub in public parking spaces. If you are going ahead with virtual permits, you are going to have to significantly increase the presence of civil enforcement officers. We rarely have one come round where I live in Greenhead Ward. When they do, they're lovely people, do their job well, but I don't think I've seen one for 2 years. I'm retired, I'm around most of the time, I don't miss much, to be perfectly honest. So, as you're tight on money, I would say you're going to be struggling to employ more people to do this job. If it's a job creation scheme that people can get jobs, well, that might be a different matter, but I don't believe that's going to be the case. Furthermore, I've listened to your feedback about the cost and what savings you're going to make. I can't see where you've given a payback time for your investment. And really, I think, although you've got a large hole in the budget, which I'm not blaming anybody for, these things happen, you've got a section of your Kirklees community that are easily identifiable. You've already got us on a database, and you're able to then impose a new parking tax just because you need the money. Not everybody can afford it, and I would also like you to come up with a new type of parking permit for driving instructors who spend a lot of time parking in my road, teaching people how to park extremely slowly so you can't get up the street. I dread to think what would happen in an emergency. And if you ask them politely to move on, you get a mouthful of abuse. So now they're teaching their students road rage and bad behaviour, as well as teaching them that parking in a permit zone when you do not have a permit is perfectly okay, which quite frankly it is not. So perhaps you might want to make a Kirklees-wide permit for driving instructors, say a couple of £1,000, and you can then reinvest that for parking permits for carers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amanda. Councillor Ahmed, there's another member of the public. Do you want to come back on Amanda's... are you Jamie Ellison? Yes. Jamie?
Thank you for letting me speak. I'll keep this as brief as I can. My name's Jamie Ellison. I'm the chairperson of the Tenants and Residents Association of both the Town Estate and the Springbank Estates, which, as you know, are in the shadow of not only the stadium, but a large commercial industrial site as well. The permit parking situation has been in place since the stadium was built. And of course, this permit parking allows you to park on the adopted highway. It doesn't give you priority over whether you can park outside your house, and parking spaces are still on a first come, first served basis. As people are already paying their road tax and insurance for the privilege of being able to park on the highway, why are they further being penalised by the council in order to now pay for permit parking, which is there only to alleviate the problems that are caused on match days and concert days? The residents themselves are just being punished. I think it's just petty penny pinching on behalf of the council. Now, the residents are proposing a few things. One is that we get rid of the permit parking altogether, which would mean a free-for-all for stadium visitors. Other people have suggested that they pay for their permits and perhaps take a few quid as payment from regular visitors to the stadium for a more convenient parking space. I'm sure a car full of 4 people would be happy to pay 20 quid to park within walking distance of the stadium. Some even are willing to pay the risk of being fined for parking near the stadium. I've lived in that community, and I love that community for 25 years now. You said you hadn't seen a parking warden for 2 years. I haven't seen a parking warden for 25 years. The idea of virtual permits will just cause further chaos. If we were to make, for instance, blue badges virtual, you wouldn't be able to tell at a glance whether someone was entitled to park in a disabled parking place or not. It would have, each car would need to be individually checked by a parking attendant. They would have to check an online database to see whether they had a permit or not. Whereas at the moment, you can simply see whether there's one on display in the car. Now, just to sum up, I really think we only have the problems, as I said, on match days and concert events. And due to the council benefiting by millions at the expense of some of the most vulnerable people in Kirklees, some of the poorest people in Kirklees who do depend on the cars. I know taxi drivers won't come near the estate if there's a match on. And these people are already struggling to afford to live on a daily basis. Even I myself have a court date on the 17th of October where a decision will be made as to whether to repossess my house or not. We all have problems, and these extra charges are completely unnecessary. There is no incentive and no initiative to pay. Just one other thing. The estates do have a few parking areas that are owned. They're not highways, they're not adopted highways, they're actually owned by housing. This is private land and are not subject to the permit parking charges. This will just create chaos for the residents on the estate, and no one will know who's entitled to park there or not if the permits do go virtual. Something has to be done.
Thank you, Mr. Ellison. Councillor Bolt is waiting to come in, but I will ask Councillor Ahmed, Councillor Bolt, if you don't mind, to respond to those two public questions first.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Amanda, for your comments from Greenhead. In terms of the parking permit and being a breach of contract, I think if you read carefully, one of the requirements is that it's always subject to change by the council, and those changes are well overdue because the last time that the changes took place were in 2014, nearly 9-10 years ago, and the council has not increased or done any changes whatsoever to the existing parking permits and the charges. So I think it's right and proper that the council should review its policies in view of the financial difficulties that we've got, but also to try and make it fairer and consistent across the board. Virtual payments, I think both yourself and Jamie Ellison mentioned it. Yeah. It's an addition to what you can already have. You know, it's not something that's there. It's the flexibility for you when you have your visitors that you can actually change the requirements online as opposed to having a bureaucratic system, so that you've actually got the right visitors who are there. And it's important that we have a system which allows you to do that. So that's very important in terms of that. In terms of, I think, Jamie, your points, I'd actually addressed those when Councillor Khan had actually put forward those concerns, is that the officers, when they had the engagement meeting with the councillors, both myself, Councillor Hawkins and Councillor Khan, did raise the issue of the unique situation that the town estate and the Springbank estate is in with the stadium, and that they are looking into that. So there is an issue, and we will come back to you in terms of that. So the match days and the concert is the issue. And I think one of the other points that you made was, let's get rid of the parking permits. Well, let's get rid of the deterrent. That is a deterrent for those that would see it and would not park it. And if it's next to the stadium and I've got no deterrent in the parking permit, I will park there. And you'll get more parking problems than the ones that you've already got. So I think that is something why there is a mixed feeling within the estate and the residents in terms of that. And I think that's not probably the way forward. I think I've addressed those points, Leader. Thanks.
I'm sorry, Amanda, you can't come back. Sorry. Councillor Turner, if it's just on those two particular contributions.
Chair, it absolutely is. I can assure the gentleman who says he hasn't seen a traffic warden for 25 years. They are active down there. I go to watch the football, and not last game, the game before, I counted 4 parking tickets on the way back to my car. They are very active. I don't want the public out there thinking they can go parking there because there's no traffic wardens. Believe you me, they are very active on a Saturday afternoon.
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor Turner. I will now ask Councillor Martin Bolt, who is online, to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, turning to the amendment that we've had at the 11th hour, adversely affecting the parking situation in Mirfield. It's a great shame to myself, I'm sure my colleagues, the shopkeepers and the residents of Mirfield, that the Cabinet member, the West Yorkshire Authority and others didn't seek to benefit from the benevolence of Network Rail and the Transpennine route upgrade, which we heard about in the previous paper, to improve the car parking facilities at the railway station. Network Rail have significant landholding around Mirfield railway station, including the former builder's yard, which is immediately adjacent to the station and railway lines, and other landholdings on the northern side of the rail. So we could have accommodated rail commuters within the railway environment without disadvantaging our traders. It'd be interesting to see where the 40 spaces currently used for short stay shoppers are going to be accommodated within the town centre. But having said that, the substantive report, again, a theme which is coming up time and time again, talks about the delegation and officer decision making. This report, it must be said, it seeks to delegate future decisions on this matter to officers. So there will not be the public consultation that we see now, because that isn't included in the recommendation. Future decision making to the relevant director in consultation with the relevant portfolio holder. To answer colleagues' questions made earlier about why a cabinet member doesn't make a delegated decision, it's the 1972 Act, Section 101, that you can't delegate decisions to an individual council. It has to be delegated to an officer. But this delegation has no public consultation before it. So what we could see is that costs could be changed at any point in the future, maybe within the next month, who knows, with no clarity on how those charges will be reviewed. There's no limitation to how much an officer could make an increase in pay. So it may be way above inflation, and indeed changing the times of charging, which ironically has already happened. There's no financial impact assessment on any of these. So particularly now with the amendment affecting Mirfield, the Cabinet member hasn't put before us any financial assessment as to how this may impact the retailers of Mirfield, and therefore obviously affects people's livelihoods and the rateable income to Kirklees. There's no financial impacts in the case of permit parking, because if 50% of the people on a permit zone petition, the permits can be removed. So there'll be a loss of income, an increase in charges for removing the TRO, etc. And should that happen, there's no financial impact assessment on this, but we don't see this. We could see that they could make an additional recommendation to limit the officers to any increase or any amendment would only be done annually by the rate of inflation, so that it would prevent huge increases being put upon the people, bearing in mind that there have been no increases for the previous 9 years of the administration. We could also see changes made as there are in other areas. The criteria is set at 25 spaces. But in the case of Mirfield, I'd question the Cabinet member if the report is correct. It says 40 spaces, but is the criteria 20 paid for spaces? Because of those in Mirfield, we have spaces which are set aside for disabled parking. And I'm sure the Cabinet member will be able to remove that number from the gross number that have been said. We also have spaces which the Labour-run combined authority allocated for electric charging. So if you remove those spaces from the gross number, it further reduces towards the 25 that the limit is at. As I say, changes could be made by officers at any point in the future. And we could end up with a situation like you have in Labour-run Wales, where I was recently, where disabled badge holders are not exempt from charges, so they could be paying as well under officer delegation should they wish. We then look at the fact that further spaces are taken away in Murfield because with the installation of a height reduction barrier, the infrastructure for that has also impacted on the number of spaces available. You can't park where there's a part of the infrastructure to support the gate. We now see that the permission is, the recommendation is for long stay all day. That changes the recommended minimum width. For some reason, when you look at highway design and if you look at national data, the recommended minimum parking width of a parking bay goes up from 2.4 metres on a short stay to 2.5 metres for a long stay. So the car parking spaces in Murfield for general parking, disabled parking is wider, should be a minimum of 2.5 metres, which they're not. So there's a further reduction in spaces. And I believe if we take all these into account, Station Road will now be below the 25 spaces criteria, and I'd like the officer or members to come and or officers to come and visit with us and recheck that. So I think it's a shame that we've had this change affecting Murfield with an amendment with no public consultation. It does again play to what people have said before, that decisions, if information is being pushed at short notice. But I would ask Councillor Ahmed, in the light of the facts which I'm presenting here, and the facts are available from national transport data about the widths of spaces, the fact that Network Rail have land available for their own, and we in Murfield want to keep parking spaces to support our shops, to support people who need to be near shops, would you agree to review this? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bolt. Councillor Ahmed, would you like to come back on that one?
Thank you, Councillor Bolt, for a very comprehensive and detailed response to the proposals. The first thing I would like to say is that the Council and ourselves and the officers as well as the Cabinet are always learning, and we have learnt from the NAB Lane scrutiny call-in, importantly, to make sure that we try and consult and engage with local residents as well as members. And as a result of this, once the affected car parks were there, every single ward member in those affected 15 car park areas were consulted. They were engaged, and there was a discussion that took place to make it very clear in terms of what the proposals were. So that was very important to do that. We have come a long way from not doing anything to maybe doing everything to really having a balanced approach. We're not saying that it's all right. We're not saying that it's all going to be 100% perfect. But I think it's a very, very good, reasonable, balanced approach and a balanced start, which we can review later down the line. In line with a lot of the concerns and the questions that you have raised, we will be able to be in a better position to be able to look at those and deal with that. So that's very important in terms of that. And I haven't got the information at hand, but I will definitely look into the Network Rail in terms of that. But clearly the general comments is that there needs to be sufficient parking spaces around in the town centre for residents. And as a result of that, there is also the issue of commuters, which you very, very emotionally, very heartfeltly mentioned it at the last council meeting in terms of the commuters. If I remember rightly, you spent quite a lot of time in terms of the commuters having Murfield as an area where people should be able to park their cars. So we have struck a balance, and I think we've tried to strike the best balance that we can. But we will review this at a later stage, and not saying that it's perfect, but it's the best at the moment, in line with the fact that we also have to make those efficiency savings and continue to make sure that we can review it and we can do the right thing.
Thank you. Councillor Joe Lawson.
Thank you, Chair. Is one of the questions I actually want to raise is around the visitors' parking permit, which is going to be £60. What was the charge for it previously? And also I'm also concerned about residents that need regular care visits. Is with organisations like district nurses from Lacala, will they be given a permit or not? There is also then those people that employ caregivers from agencies. Are they going to be expected to buy a £60 ticket so that their caregiver doesn't end up with a parking ticket on there? And let's go back to enforcement. If you're going to ask people to pay more, they are going to want to see traffic wardens coming down. Within Crossland Moor and Neverton Ward, we don't actually have that much parking, residence parking, but there was an issue where half of David Brown's factory were actually just parking along one of the roads because nobody actually came down and did it. I myself ended up thinking I was actually parking in a residence parking area, but because the road was so covered in leaves, I didn't realise I was actually on a double yellow line as I went to the Pakistani Association meeting with them. But there is no visible enforcement, and that is a serious issue, not only for residents parking, but for people that park on double yellow lines at various places as well. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Ahmed, we've got quite a few councillors who want to come up, so do you mind if you take them all?
I thought that was the end.
No, sorry, no, it's not. Can I ask Councillor Bramwell to come in next, please?
There was meetings between officers and councillors regarding the parking charges. However, Dewsbury West did not have that meeting, and I was given an email stating that it was an oversight and that Graham West is now on holiday and it is now too late to have that meeting, and the cabinet meeting is already here. So in future, for future reference, if that happens again, can a meeting be rescheduled as urgency? Because we're the middle people between residents and yourselves. That's the first thing I want to raise. The second thing is the virtual permits. The feedback I've had from my residents is it is a huge barrier. A lot of my residents will not be able to go down that road and actually apply or use online. So it's a massive barrier for residents. The parking permits and the visitor parking. So it was it £0 the visitors, and there's now £60, and there's also been an increase now to £35. That's what the council would like to do. Dewsbury West does not have any car park, so it is the permit holder badges that we're going to be impacted by in my ward, and we are high in deprivation, high in poverty. This is going to have serious negative effects on many of my residents. Once again, every time there are budgeting issues in the council, of course there's got to be cutbacks, but it's our residents that are suffering the most, and there's been no consultation done with residents on this, and they're the ones that's going to be impacted. So honestly, it's been a shame to be throughout this entire meeting because it's been massive issues, but the parking charges is something that my residents are not happy about across the borough, can I state? So yes, Dewsbury West is going to be hit by the parking permits, but there's also going to be increases of parking charges across Kirklees, including the town centres in Cleckheaton, in Dewsbury East, which is a town centre, and things like that. This is going to have detrimental effects on businesses. It's having effects on people that are going to want to use and access our towns, visitors coming in. So the feedback that I've had from residents across, again, not just in my ward, but residents across the borough in the north of Kirklees, is that this should not be happening. Not the permit charges increases, not the visitors permit, and not the parking charges as increased. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bramwell. Councillor John Lawson, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to start with permit parking, if I may. I think one of the things that's hard to understand is the step change, just where we were and how we want to, the way forward we want to go, and the size of that step change. And it going from and as one of the previous speakers from the public said, going from a vehicle lifetime charge to an annual charge is really quite fundamental about how we implement these charges. I think what I'd mention as well is that the particularly badly affected areas, there are two. One is the stadium that has been already mentioned with some eloquence by the members of the public. The other is Lindley and around where the hospital has very considerable permit parking. And I think there's a feeling there from what I understand from the ward members there who feedback. There's a real feeling that we're harvesting meat from a trapped animal, and these people have no choice. They live there. The goalposts have been changed on them, and I think that is the real feeling there of the people who are there. I think we need to explain as well. We need to have explained to us the lack of an impact assessment on the town centres like Cleckheaton and Batley, on the businesses. The businesses, the shoppers, the visitors and the workers are all affected, and there is no benchmarking visible from any business service, any proactive business services. I'm not talking about the consultation here. There's no commentary on social isolation, and there's no understanding about how the network works together and how those communities might, if they are reliant on cars and going to receive extra car parking charges, about what things like transport links, how they might dovetail into this plan and help people and mitigate the impact. I'd also ask what checks you did to make that there was a consistent pricing structure. So, for example, Cleckheaton, in one of the car parks, in fact, in a couple of them, the first 2 hours are free, and then we go to 80p, 160, 240, 330, and then 650 for anything above. That makes the last hour in that structure £3.20, not 80p. And it just seems a little bit random and mysterious why we should be walloped right at the end of that car parking time, that schedule, with a £3.20 charge for an extra hour. What also I didn't see in the report, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, was any idea of the days of operation and the hours of operation. Those I could not find. Lastly, I would say there's lots more to say. I could be here all afternoon, but lastly, I would comment that on page 50 of the agenda pack, it refers to the Road Traffic Regulation Act of 1984. And are you sure? I mean, absolutely sure that this complies to that act and the reference to easing congestion and the idea of reasonable income drawn. Car parks, like we find in Cleckheaton, that are not full all the time, are rarely congested. So to close, I just think there's a feeling that we've had some movement on this. It's an acknowledgement that it was a flawed plan to begin with, but there is a sense that we're suffering from commitment bias here, and that we're ending up with and not arriving at a decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. I have Councillor Sheard next, please.
Sorry, I thought I'd clicked it. Burstle and Berkenshaw is a community that's vibrant, hardworking, and really proud of its local identity. But we now stand at a crossroads, facing difficult decisions that are going to shape the future of our community. I really want to speak directly about this Labour Cabinet's continued neglect for our community, and a trend that today has actually become all too familiar for residents in my ward and across North Kirklees. We first had the Batley Sports and Tennis Centre threatened with closure. We've now had dementia care homes and today as well, waste removal. Basic services that everyone relies on are now being compromised by this Cabinet. The Cabinet is actively making life harder for our residents, and now we are facing the imminent threat of parking charges. If the Cabinet carries on, it's going to go for a hat-trick today. The Labour Cabinet is proposing to impose fees on our village, a move that's going to directly harm our local businesses and drive footfall away from our community elsewhere. A move that, quite frankly, is baffling. The Cabinet seems to be prioritising short-term revenue over long-term community well-being. This proposal is not just an inconvenience, it's an economic threat. It risks driving away customers, harming local businesses that have worked tirelessly to create a vibrant atmosphere in Birstall. We should be supporting these businesses and not placing obstacles in their path. It's a move that is going to burden the majority of our elderly population. The introduction of parking meters required to be paid for by an app. This is a prime example of how out of touch this council's become. Many of our residents don't use smartphones or apps, and imposing such measures is nothing less than exclusionary. It will deter those who struggle with technology from visiting Birstall Marketplace and supporting local businesses, further isolating them. This isn't just a financial burden, it's an attack on the heart of Birstall. Our shops and services within the Birstall Chamber of Trade have worked tirelessly over the last couple of years to create a welcoming, bustling environment. And by placing barriers like these parking charges in their way, you're not just harming individual businesses, you're undermining the very spirit of our village. Let's take a quick look at the numbers. The council recorded an impressive £951,000 income over expenditure from parking charges across the borough. Yet instead of recognising the potential of our local businesses and investing back into our community, this Cabinet seems more interested in generating revenue than supporting the very fabric of our society. Investing back into North Kirklees will do more to generate funding than imposing fees upon us. We must be clear. The councillors for Birstall and Berkenshaw and a whole community across North Kirklees will not stand for parking charges, not now, not ever. This isn't just about today, it's about the future of Birstall and Berkenshaw and North Kirklees. We all together stand united as a community against these proposals. The Cabinet needs to advocate for local businesses, supporting our residents and ensuring that our village remains a place where people want to come, live, work and visit. Instead of penalising our community, let's look for ways to empower it, invest into our local infrastructure, promote sustainable practices that don't burden our residents, and support the Chamber of Trade in creating a thriving environment for our businesses to flourish. The people of Birstall, Berkenshaw, East Byley and the whole of North Kirklees deserve better than the neglect that this council is giving us, and short-sighted policies that are being proposed upon us. If the Cabinet had any sense right now, today, they'd refuse this proposal. I think enough is enough. Give us some up.
Thank you, Councillor Sheard. Councillor Smage.
Thank you. I absolutely agree. Why do we need new parking charges at all? But my question is procedural. So you have on your report a delegation, and the wording is delegate future decision making regarding revisions to parking charges to the relevant exec director in consultation with the relevant portfolio holder. It is the words regarding revisions to parking charges. Remember, this delegation will be in place not just for now, but for a considerable length of time if you agree it. My question is this just on uplift on existing charges? Will there be discussions with ward councillors or members of the public? but is it also applicable for any other changes to parking charges, i.e. in any other car parks? The delegation is quite loose in its wording, and I would have hoped that following other questions about delegations, that wording in Cabinet reports would actually make it clear what the Cabinet is intending the delegation to be for. Assurances aren't, you can give all the assurances in the world, but if you take a decision on a delegation, then everybody needs to know what that delegation is for, and for it to be clear, not just for the Cabinet, but also for the officers who will have to will no doubt have to use this delegation in the future. And therefore I think it is important that the Cabinet maybe get some advice on what the actual wording for this delegation should be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smage. Can I ask Councillor Thompson to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I had a well-crafted speech to deliver, which all of it's now been said, so I'll wing it as usual. But what I will wing is some of the items and phrases that have been used during talking about this subject. One from a Cabinet member who said, "It's not perfect." Another phrase that was used was, "review further down the line." Well, unfortunately for some residents and businesses in our local communities, there might not be a down the line. Because these items that we're talking about now could affect them as far as their businesses permanently. So if we've got to review further down the line and it's not perfect, maybe we should postpone any sort of decision making on parking today until it is perfect, and that the review has been done thoroughly, so we know exactly what the impact is going to be as far as council and residents are concerned, and we don't move forward on like a knee-jerk reaction on the recommendations of officers until all these assessments are done. And further to what two of my colleagues have covered is when it says in recommendations, delegate future decision making regarding revisions to parking charges to the relevant executive director, which means basically to me that it's never going to come in front of us again. The decision will be made without us even knowing, and implementation will be delivered, and we'll find out probably with 2 days notice like we did at reference to the tip. So I would say to the Cabinet today is that this cannot be voted on and passed until the review is perfect and that we know exactly what is the impact that's going to be down the line. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Can I ask Councillor Andrew Pinnock to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I must emphasise that I am not going to talk about permit parking. What I need to talk about is, I suppose, specifically the situation in relation to parking in Cleckheaton, but this does apply to other parts of North Kirklees because this 25 parking space limit has been put on. So that any car park that has 25 spaces or more falls into this category. There are car parks in Birstall, in Murfield, I think, in Batley, as well as in Cleckheaton. The issue, although my ward colleagues and I have fought long and hard about this, in relation to Cleckheaton, it does apply to other places. It's very interesting, actually, that when we had a debate some months ago, which was prompted by our petition and one from Councillor Greaves, that practically everybody else from all other parts of Kirklees joined in that debate, because clearly it was an issue that they felt very strongly about, and I don't blame them, frankly. Councillor Lawson has already mentioned the somewhat illogical charges that are proposed for our car parks at any rate, and I presume that that may also apply to Birstall and Batley, of this high marginal rate if you stay there all day. It's bonkers. It's not been thought, well, it doesn't appear to have been thought through properly. Then there is the issue about, can I ask, what is the council plan for? Because the council plan talks about the vitality and viability of our large range of different sorts of centres. Now, if you're going to impose parking charges where none exist at the moment, then you have to think very long and very hard as to whether doing that won't have a damaging effect on those places. Can I point out that where most of these centres are, we are in competition with places like the White Rose Centre, like Junction 27, and also to some extent Alcotes. A lot of businesses in our centres are on the knife edge and dependent on being able to employ people locally who need to come by car because the local bus service isn't as reliable as it ought to be. I mean, that's a whole different argument. We need to do something about that, but as things stand at the moment, people need their cars. There's also, associated with that, there's been lack of meaningful consultation with our Chamber of Trade. I don't know whether this applies in Batley and other places as well. But the people wanting to do this would then get the message that some of their workers have to come by car because of the point that I made just now about bus services. There doesn't appear to be a business plan. Now, I could stand corrected on this, but my impression is that the business plan is going to be developed when we actually put the machines in and start doing it. We'll then find out what the likely demand. Yes, Councillor Thompson might well smile at that. I think this is a cockeyed way of going about the business of dealing with car parking charges. It does not make any sense at all. You work out as best you can how you think it's going to work first before you start putting the thing in. It's almost like making it up as you go along. I'm sorry, but I have to characterise it like that because it doesn't make an awful lot of sense. Councillor Lawson also mentioned the Act of Parliament, which I can't quote verbatim, but it does say things like that you're not supposed to make a profit out of this. It's supposed to be for the repayment of expenses, if you like. The Act of Parliament does actually say that. It's quite clear. I've read the relevant bits from it. In fact, they're actually in the report. So I wonder whether that's been read. And I also share this problem about who's going to do the revisions. As has been mentioned, if you delegate it, then you can't scrutinise it. I had a case at Wyker where a decision had been delegated, therefore we couldn't scrutinise it. We did get round that actually in the end, but however, I won't go into that. But the principle is wrong. If it's important, then you have to leave the responsibility for it with elected representatives. Full stop. I think I'll stop there, otherwise I could go on all day.
Thank you, Councillor Pinnock. I have two more speakers. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Paul Moore has been trying to log back on because he got logged out, and because it's more or less the same, I'll combine our statements, but I'll read his, but a lot of what I was going to say is actually in that, so if it'll be helpful to you. So it started the heading with the free parking for Batley and Cleckheaton. This is not at the detriment of them. We're fully supportive that you do get that. But since being elected, I have been told by officers and councillors that Dewsbury Town Centre is a priority. Sadly, Dewsbury Town Centre has got progressively worse and is now on its knees, with shops vacating almost on a monthly basis since I was elected, and that's Councillor Paul Moore. The town has virtually no retail offer and is getting harder and harder to attract people to the town centre. Fewer people in the town centre has also led to stalls on the market closing, local businesses and residents having to cry out for short periods of free parking for years. We are told that there is a blueprint for the regeneration of Dewsbury Town Centre, and I can attest to that, but it clearly has not got a priority for this administration. By allowing 2 free hours parking in other areas is ignoring the needs of Dewsbury. This only puts another nail in its coffin for Dewsbury Town Centre. Can Dewsbury Town Centre be prioritised for the 2-hour parking in line with our neighbouring towns? This will help regenerate, revitalise the town centre. Why was Dewsbury not included on this? And there must be an answer to that. And on the other item, it was about the parking permits. The increase in the cost of the parking permits from a one-off to £15 to £35 charge and a £60 charge for visitors permit is nothing more on a tax for residents to park outside their house. But hang on, even if you have a permit, you can't park outside your house, but we'll encourage you to get a permit, but we might not have enforcement. In Dewsbury East, there's many terraced properties in the poorer areas where residents do not have a drive. That's particularly around the town centre. Eastbury in particular has this crisis. They only ended up with permits because people from the town centre wouldn't park in the town centre and pay them charges. They went outside the area and then took over Eastborough Estate, which is shocking quite really, and it's a shame that it's come to this. At a time when the cost of living crisis is challenging families across Kirklees, this parking tax will have a considerable financial burden on families. Will the council consider the reverse of this decision and support families in Dewsbury East and families across Kirklees? Do you agree that this will impact on some of the most disadvantaged families across Kirklees? And what we're asking Councillor Paul Moore and myself is that you defer this decision, you go back and deal with it on a fairer basis.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. That covers both of your questions. Councillor Kendrick.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to gazump Councillor Ahmed, but this bit about delegated decision-making is really winding me up. It is fairly standard custom and practice, and as Councillor Bolt pointed out, delegated decisions cannot be granted to an individual councillor. And when it says delegated decision-making to an executive director, it doesn't mean they say, oh, right, we're doing this, and Councillor Ahmed nods his head. He then scrutinises it, questions it, talks to the rest of the cabinet about it. It's not a carte blanche by officers to run away and do what they like. And it is really misleading for councillors to intimate that, or it's their ignorance. I don't know which. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. I think that's the end of the questions on. So, Councillor Ahmed, would you like to come back?
Okay, thank you. I'll try and address as many comments as possible, and if I don't, my apologies right at the beginning, and please do write to me, and I will try and respond to that. Right, starting off in terms of the care workers. First of all, virtual permits has been addressed. In terms of the care worker situation, Let me just go back. In terms of, is there a provision for care workers within the permits? That's what you'd asked. Yes, this is called a special residential permit, which can be issued to the National Health Service, local authorities or charitable organisations. The cost of the permit is £20 per annum with a maximum stay, and there have been no charges made to this and the existing one, so there is no additional charges to that. First of all, Councillor Bramwell's gone now, but my apologies if the consultation did not take place over in Dewsbury West. But the comments that I wanted to make was that the consultation goes back to April prior to Councillor Bramwell being a councillor at that time, so the consultation process has been happening and has taken place, even though they may not have taken part, they were not involved with that one as well. I take on board Councillor Lawson's view on the Lindley Hospital and some of those special circumstances where permits are being issued, and I would say in the similar response to what we'd said over at the town estate, individual cases of those should be taken individually and looked at in terms of what's the best possible course, possible solution in terms of that. Days and hours of operations, same as existing. I think people were saying, what is it? If you know, we're continuing with that, there's no particular changes in terms of that. Business plan. I think somebody asked about where's the proposed business plan in terms of this. In the financial implications, the additional income for car parking was estimated at 152,588, and it's based on the stated 80p per hour, 2 hours of free parking, and an occupancy rate of 20%. So that's what the business calculations and the business rates have been looked at, and we will obviously review that at a later stage. But that's those were the methodologies that have been used in terms of that. That was in terms of not having a business plan, and that's been addressed. In terms of consultations, I think continually people, members have made the comment that they haven't. The consultation has been quite extensive, and as I mentioned before, we've learnt from the previous NAB Lane scrutiny as well, and we ensured that this time all members that were going to be affected were consulted on this. And in terms of Councillor Scott and Councillor Paul Moore's comments about Dewsbury, can I suggest that you look at the blueprint of Dewsbury Market Plan in terms of the cultural heart? Because I was actually given so much information about so much, forward planning in terms of the investment and the long-term investment that is being put into the Dewsbury Town Centre to try and look at that. So please do that in terms of looking at, do not just look at the parking charges in isolation. It's the overall holistic approach for Dewsbury which is there. And that's
Thank you, Councillor Ahmed. Right. So, Councillor Ahmed, you are proposing the recommendations in this report. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Crook. All those in favour? Thank you. That is carried. Right, thank you. We will now move on to item 12, which is Honley Village Hall Community Asset Transfer.
Chair, thank you. Hopefully this is going to be very brief, given the way we conducted our business this afternoon. So this report seeks Cabinet's approval to approve a 125-year lease of Honley Village Hall to Honley Village Community Trust. This is a well-used facility and has an ambitious trust running it. They have already invested in the building, have longer-term plans to replace their existing building with a new, larger facility, something the Council is unlikely to be ever able to do for many, many years. Of course, the application has been rigorously assessed and is compliant with our asset transfer policy. It's the right thing to do for the Council to step away and let the community run its own facility. Chair, can I ask Cabinet to approve this asset transfer, and I would like to wish the Trust well in its future endeavours.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Do we have a seconder for that? Thank you. Can I see all those in favour? Thank you. And finally, the last item, which is the regulatory notice progress. Thank you, Councillor Crook.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. So apologies, I know it's been a long afternoon, but there's a couple of things I want to say about this. I'll try to be brief. In March of this year, Kirklees Homes and Neighbourhoods was found to be in breach of its obligations under the consumer standards and was served with a notice to improve by the regulator of social housing. This was in response to self-referral by the service with respect to a high number of outstanding fire safety remedial actions and also persistently high number of damp, mould and condensation cases. I'd just like to reiterate that mitigations have been in place for any outstanding fire safety actions so that tenants are not placed at undue risk due to our failure to deliver remediations in a fast enough time frame. In addition to our self-referral on the basis of fire safety actions and damp, mould and condensation, the Council has also subsequently identified a need for additional assessment with respect to management of risks around water hygiene in private homes. Following the initial notice to improve, a significant programme of service-wide process improvement has been implemented, as well as mobilisation of additional internal and external resource to ensure we become compliant in the shortest possible timeframe and to ensure that we maintain compliance hereafter. This work has included effective recruitment to vacancies, plus additional staffing where needed, and service-wide improvements to processes and to data handling with IT upgrades to provide better assurance on stock condition and work completed. We have recently adopted a new damp, mould and condensation policy, taking this risk outside of our standard reactive repairs policy and articulating both improved process and strategy to resolve outstanding cases, with significant additional resource of £2 million allocated in the current year. We have made progress against our outstanding fire safety actions with work on high-rise, 6-storey blocks, retirement living schemes and all of our homes identified, resourced and on a pathway to completion. It is worth noting that from a starting point of 271 high-risk actions outstanding, these more urgent issues have now all been resolved and we currently have 0 outstanding in this category. Finally, the required water assessments are now underway, or starting this week, may have started this week already, but I'm not sure, and will now be carried out along with our standard annual gas safety checks. All of the higher risk checks will be completed this year, with the remainder finalised over a 12-month period from start. Tenant safety is our highest priority. We want to provide safe and warm, secure and decent homes for all our tenants. So investment in our homes and services remains our principal focus. I do also just want to thank officers for all the hard work they've put into transforming this service. There's still a long way to go, but I'm now confident of improvement. Feedback from the regulator to date has confirmed that the service is providing a high level of assurance on improvement against our self-reported failings, and this report provides an update on progress to date, aligned with our reporting and updates to the regulator. I recommend that Cabinet note the report here and approve it be shared with stakeholders as appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Can I see a seconder for that?
I'll get in before Councillor Crook.
All those in favour? Thank you. And can I just say to those members left in this room, I apologise for losing my temper earlier. Thank you. So the meeting is now closed. Are we?
Aren't you gone?